Hey, how are you? My name is Jeremy. I'm going to be reading from Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning. I'll be on page 124. This will be blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure estimates the pressure exerted against the arterial walls as blood is forcefully ejected during ventricular contraction, systole. And when combined with heart rate, can be used to describe the work of the heart. This estimate of the work of the heart is obtained according to the following equation, is preferred and is referred to as the rate pressure product or double product. The rate pressure product equals the heart rate times the systolic blood pressure. So the diastolic blood pressure is used to estimate the pressure exerted against the arterial walls when no blood is being forcibly ejected through the vessels. Diastole. It provides an indication of peripheral resistance and can decrease with aerobic exercise due to vasodilation. In systemic circulation, pressure is highest in the aorta and arteries and rapidly falls off within the venous circulation. Also, because pumping by the heart is pulsatile, arterial pressure fluctuates between a systolic level of 120 millimoles of mercury and a diastolic level of 80 millimoles of mercury. They're both approximate values. As the blood flow continues through this systemic circulation, its pressure falls progressively to nearly 0 millimoles of mercury. That's your venous pressure, by the time it reaches the termination of the vena cava in the right atrium. The mean arterial pressure is the average blood pressure throughout the cardiac cycle. It is not the average of the systolic and diastolic pressure. It is the average blood pressure throughout the cardiac cycle. It is not the average of the systolic and diastolic pressures because the arterial pressure usually remains nearer the diastolic level than the systolic level during a greater portion of the cardiac cycle. Thus, the mean arterial pressure is usually less than the average of the systolic and diastolic pressures. So, mean arterial blood pressure equals the systolic blood pressure minus the diastolic blood pressure, and then divide that by 3, and then add back in that diastolic blood pressure. Normal resting blood pressure generally ranges from 110 to 139 millimoles of mercury systolic and from 60 to 89 diastolic. With maximal aerobic exercise, systolic pressure can normally rise to as much as 220 to 260 millimoles of mercury. With diastolic pressure remains at the resting level or decreases slightly. Control of local circulation. Blood flow is a function of resistance in the blood vessels. As resistance is reduced, blood flow is increased. And as resistance increases, blood flow is reduced. The amount of resistance to blood flow is primarily a function of the diameter of the systemic blood vessels. The resistance of the entire systemic circulation is called the total peripheral resistance. As blood vessels throughout the body become constricted, total peripheral resistance increases. With dilation, peripheral resistance decreases. Resistance to blood flow is increased with resistance to blood flow is increased with increasing viscosity of the blood and length of the vessel. However, these factors remain relatively constant under most circumstances. Thus, vasoconstriction or vasodilation of blood vessels and the primary mechanisms for regulating regional blood flow. During aerobic exercise, blood flow to active muscles is considerably increased by the dilation of local arterioles, and at the same time, blood flow to other organ systems is reduced by constriction of the arterioles. At rest, 15% to 20% of the cardiac output is distributed to skeletal muscle, whereas with vigorous exercise, the value may rise up to 90% of cardiac output. Acute aerobic exercise results in increased cardiac output, stroke volume, heart rate, oxygen uptake, systolic blood pressure, and blood flow to active muscles, and decrease in diastolic blood pressure. we'll leave it there. That's a section on blood pressure and control of liver circulation. That's page 124 to 125. See ya.